Hi, I'm Roger Nygaard. I'm a filmmaker. No matter what I do, I'm probably most notorious for a documentary I made called Trekkies. Most recently, I made a documentary called The Truth About Marriage. And I also edit and direct TV shows. And right now, I'm editing a TV show called Veep. And you're watching Mr. Media.
There is something special about Roger Nygaard. He leads two very different lives in Hollywood. By day, he's been a video editor on top comedy series such as Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and most recently, he was part of Sacha Baron Cohen's team on the politically explosive Showtime series Who is America? He also worked on Crashing with Pete Holmes, The League, The Office, and The Bernie Mac Show, and Grey's Anatomy. But by night, Nygaard is a highly successful documentary filmmaker. His natural curiosity, ear for dialogue, and gentle demeanor has led to several wonderful documentaries. They include Trekkies and Trekkies 2, about the singular sensation of Star Trek fans. The Nature of Existence, about, well, everything. And his latest, The Truth About Marriage, also self-explanatory, which he just wrapped a few weeks ago. This is Roger's fourth visit to Mr. Media. I encourage you to watch or listen to his earlier appearances after this one, and of course, all of his output. Roger Nygaard, welcome back to Mr. Media.
Good to be back.
Always good to hear from you, and you always have something interesting going on. The last time we spoke, you had just finished editing Season 8 of Curb Your Enthusiasm, I believe, and we're elbow to elbow with Larry David. So let's kind of pick up chronologically from there. Was Veep your next gig, or was there something between them?
Boy, that's a good question. No, I think I went on to do several years of The League in between as far as my television editing work. And yeah, that filled up several years because I worked on that until the final season, and we did 7 seasons. I didn't work on every season of The League because one year I was editing a movie for Mike Binder called Black or White. It was a Kevin Costner film. So yeah, that's by memory. I've got to remember my own resume, which is always kind of a challenge.
And Binder, of course, you worked on The Mind of the Merry Man.
That's where I got my start editing TV shows. Yes, I was working with Mike Binder on that show.
Okay, I didn't realize. We forget sometimes how long the gap between season 8 and season 9 of Curb was, and I kind of lost track. So how many?
Gap. Yeah, huge gap. There was a big time. Larry took a lot of time off. He did a Broadway show called Fish in the Dark, and then he wrote a movie called Clear History, and then he finally circled back around and felt he had enough ideas or desire to get back to his TV show.
And did you work on season 9?
No, I didn't, because it overlapped with Veep, which I was already working on, and it was a really tough thing that you can't split into 2 people, and I was already committed to Veep.
Wow. And I was curious about Veep, and yes, I'm skipping a little bit over The League because I didn't watch The League. I'm sorry. I know these other shows very well. Did getting involved with Veep have anything to do with Curb, or was it just coincidental that these two, that Larry David and Julia Louis-Dreyfus were obviously so tied together previously?
They were definitely directly linked because the showrunner, the showrunner, executive producer of Veep is Dave Mandel, who was one of Larry David's 3 writers that he worked very closely with on season 8 of Curb Your Enthusiasm. It was Alec Berg, Dave Mandel, and Jeff Schaffer. And Jeff Schaffer went on to do The League, which is why I went to go work on that show. And then Dave Mandel went off to do Veep, and Alec Berg.
No one ever heard of Alec Berg again. Poor guy.
Yeah, he's been busy. I think he just suffered through an Emmy nomination for
Barry.
Right. Yeah. So he's been busy.
Silicon Valley.
They've all Barry. He worked on Barry recently, and actually, I think he had multiple nominations on both shows.
Yeah.
But yeah, all 3 of those guys went off and have been very busy, and they've kept me busy too.
That's awesome. So there was a connection, obviously. I mean, it's almost incestuous in some ways how connected things in Hollywood can be. But I mean, this is great for you. Obviously, people like your work. What is it? You and I don't know that people understand that much about video editing. They're like, oh well, there's the showrunner, and all the everything genius of these shows comes out of the showrunner. But on the shows that we're talking about, uh, Curb and Veep, and we'll get to Who Is America. Um, the beats, the rhythm of the comedy, and what you're trying to achieve. A lot of that has to come in the editing bay, I think, because if you stay on a beat, if you stay on a shot too long, the comedy's kind of lost, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the old sayings is that editing is the final rewrite of the script. So you need a good editor who is also your final rewriter on any given show. Particularly, I worked on Grey's Anatomy also, and these shows vary in that, for instance, Grey's Anatomy, you cut it right to the script. They want it exactly as written. Leave nothing out and make your best version of the script from the materials they shoot. Curb Your Enthusiasm is on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, and The League was in that same area also, and Veep is closer to that side of the spectrum where there's a lot of give and take, a lot of improv, a lot of alternate lines. They're trying different things, all trying to make the show as funny as possible, and then I get to choose what makes me laugh. So you're seeing the version that I think is the most amusing. That's what I present then to the director, and then the showrunner, the executive producer, and then they tweak it to their final version, which is what airs.
And I don't want to give the impression that I'm trying to suggest that your vision of the show or your work on the show is more important than Larry David's or David Mandel's. But that's the nature of these shows. It's very collaborative. That once it goes from David's hand or whoever, the showrunner, the director of an episode, then once it's in the video editor's hands, you've got to shape it as the way you see it, and then it goes, as you said, back to them to fit it, to make sure it fits their vision.
I agree with all of that. And you could give the same footage to two different editors, you're going to get two different outcomes. You want an editor, in my opinion, who's going to give you 80% of his choices you're going to keep. You don't want to have to replace 50% of the editor's choices, or you'll be there all day. The sooner I can get Larry David out of the editing room and onto the golf course, the happier he is. He doesn't want to spend all day in there rethinking what I did. When I'm directing too, I want an editor who gets it there, who gets it, so I don't have to work hard redoing what he's doing.
The last time we spoke, Larry David and you were literally working that day in the editing bay. As a matter of fact, I think we wrapped up a little bit sooner than I thought we were going to, because Larry was waiting to get in with you to work on the editing. In the case of a David Mandel or a Jeff Berg, Alec Berg, any of these guys, are they in the editing bay with you, or are they waiting for you to do your editing? Is it different than the way Larry did it with you, for example?
They're all a little bit unique, but what's the same is you're given the time to finish your cut, your editor's cut, and you present, here's my best shot at a first pass of the show. Then the director has a few days, although on some shows, sometimes they come in and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they send in notes. Sometimes they don't. It depends on the director and the show. With Curb Your Enthusiasm, the directors are less involved because it's Larry David's show and he's going to do what he wants. And when Larry comes in, he would watch all the footage with you. You would watch together. You would watch from day one to the final day of shooting, and then he would select things and say, let's try that, and I like that, and maybe you can squeeze that in. So then I would go through and try and squeeze everything else in that he selected from the raw footage and create this huge monster cut. Then that the next step is to just cut it down to time, get it under 30 minutes. With some other shows, it's different. Like Jeff Schaffer on The League, he was really good at multitasking, and he'd give me lists of notes, and he'd go work with other editors and give them notes and move around and keep things moving, because he was doing almost everything on The League. He's writing and directing, and she was showrunner. So he didn't have time to sit in one place for very long. On Veep, Dave Mandel is very focused on the writing and directing of the show. He directs a couple episodes usually. And when it's finally time for him to come and sit in the editing room, then he focuses on just that episode for about a week until he finishes his cut, his take. And he doesn't go back and rethink. Once he makes a decision, he's done. Some EPs will spend the time reconsidering, rethinking, trying different things, try this, try that. So they're all different. And as an editor, you have to adapt to what their process is. And if there's a deadline, that forces you to all to adapt and move quickly. And if, like with Curb Your Enthusiasm, the deadline is a little looser, they give more time because it takes longer to do it Larry's way. With something like Grey's Anatomy, they have 24 shows that they have to get out. It's almost an assembly line, and so you have to meet your deadlines. The train's moving, and it's going to leave without you if you're not ready. So an editor has to be adaptive to each of those environments.
So I want to come back to Grey's in a minute because it's so different than this other type of work. I would think, but I'm curious. I think I had read David Mandel talking about some of the things that not David Mandel. I'm thinking about Curb, and I'm wondering if this was going on in the 3 seasons that you worked on it, or if this happened for the 9th season. But I thought I had read somewhere that they had added another camera that was always on Larry, so that there were the cameras that were shooting, the wide shot or the 2 shots of the close-ups, but they had added a camera that always stayed on Larry, which may not have been the case at the beginning of the show. Maybe that happened. I don't know when that happened, but
that's essentially accurate. Yeah. I mean, they started out with 2 cameras. I mean, all cameras, single camera comedy is what it used to be called when they're shooting film style. There's one camera, and you shoot one side, and then you shoot the other side. As time has gone on, and with the difference in price between shooting film and shooting digitally, they've added cameras. Curb Your Enthusiasm started out as a very low-budget show when it first began on HBO. And as time went on, they found if they could shoot with 2 cameras, then they can move more quickly, and they added a camera. On Curb Your Enthusiasm, typically they'd shoot one camera. It would be on one person. The other camera would be panning between people, so they could try to get those pans. And oftentimes they'd pan off, and they'd be off of somebody when we needed them to be on that person. And if it's an improv show and it's the only time they said that line, you may lose that line. You can't use it, which is heartbreaking. Adding a 3rd camera means you won't miss as many lines on an improv show. But it also means that a lot of shows can move more quickly, or they can have more options in the editing room. So most shows now shoot with 2 or probably 3 cameras. And on Veep, they've added a 4th camera this season. So now there's 4 cameras shooting at all times.
Wow.
The downside is that they can get in each other's way and it affects the lighting. Feature films, high-budget feature films, typically won't do this because the biggest difference between TV and feature films is the lighting. Films look cinematic because they take the time to light a shot. And if you've got 2 cameras, you can't light for one camera. You're lighting for 2 cameras, and it tends to flatten everything out. If you're lighting for one camera, you can tweak it and make it look beautiful just for that one angle and for every angle. And then it looks cinematic and looks gorgeous and beautiful because you have the time to spend. But on a TV show, they may not have that time. They typically don't have that time. And so what is the priority? On Veep and Curb and most sitcoms, the priority is funny. How do we get as much funny material filmed as quickly as possible? So there's a bit of a sacrifice of look for material.
Well, and those shows they're moving around a lot too. I mean, Curb is on the move. Larry seems like he's moving around a lot. Veep, it seems like there's lots of tracking because you're moving through rooms, you're moving around the room. So in these situations where there are multiple cameras on what we used to think of as handheld single camera shows, it must be maddening at times for you. Are you looking at 3 or 4 views simultaneously? Do you look at one
Yes.
first straight through? That's what I'm kind of curious about. Because that's where the skill of the editing comes in, right? You've got to decide which camera to go to at which time to get the best beat, the best hit on the joke.
It could take you forever to go through all of this footage and all these different angles. But my assistant will group all the cameras that shoot at the same time, and then I have a display that shows all 4 cameras, or sometimes 6. And I've got an episode now where there's going to be 8 cameras because there's a debate. And so that's, they're just proliferating.
That's on Veep, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
sorry.
so what I do is I usually start from the back and work forward. I'll start with one of the last takes of either the widest take, maybe the first take is the widest, or the second series, the second setup will be tighter shots with what they call them swinging singles. And I'll look for the takes where they felt like they got it. They maybe have added some funny lines. As the takes progress, they tend to get funnier, and there may be the best takes tend to be toward the end. So I work from the back forward, pick a take, build a scene from that take, and then try to beat it as I look through the other takes. And by moving toward the beginning, I don't have to spend as much time focusing on the early takes because I already know, I already got the best version of that line in a later take. And so I can move over that one. And I'm looking for improvements. And sometimes the best version of something is in the first take, but most of it is in the later takes.
And is it taking you longer now than it did 5 years ago to edit one of these shows because of the multiple cameras?
I think it is it is taking longer, but not much longer. You have to. I find ways to try to find ways to get there at the same speed, even though I have more footage to look through. And one of my tricks is just to work from the back forwards.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I think you sort of answered it, was if you were teaching a class on how to edit shows like this, what would you want your students to know? And it sounds like that would be a major tip for them. Start from the end and work your way forward. It's kind of like if you're talking to a novelist, a lot of them want to establish the ending before they get to the beginning, so they know where they're going.
That would be that'd be tip number 1. Tip number 2: never go out on a blink. Right, you want to cut before someone closes their eyes. And a lot of actors are very blinky, and some aren't. We like the ones that don't blink a lot. It doesn't force our hand because it's distracting for someone to blink and then you cut. You always want to cut with their eyes still open. It's just less distracting.
Yeah,
you would have known that, right? So rule number 2. And I spend a lot of time looking for enunciation. The best enunciated version of some words are really important because if you don't clearly hear the setup, the punchline isn't going to land. And we probably spend more time on these comedy shows, particularly on Veep, on the setups, more time on the setups than on the punchlines, making sure that the setups are clear. You'll see a lot of times on Curb Your Enthusiasm that the setups are sometimes delivered over the back of Larry's head because we've done it later. We've looped it in. We've recorded it after they finished shooting when Larry realized the setup wasn't strong enough or it was too verbose or he wants to compact it and say it better. So he'll restate it in a more concise way over the back of his head talking to somebody. If you look, you'll watch for that. You might start to notice that now, that happens a lot.
I know after the last time we talked, after season 8, I guess, was taped, but before we'd seen it, I watched the show very differently because I'm looking for the things that we spoke about. So now once again, you will have changed my way of watching these shows. That's awesome. How are these? So we haven't started talking about Who Is America yet. So let's just say Veep and Curb, and I'm guessing The League was probably more scripted than these other 2 shows.
The League was very similar to Curb Your Enthusiasm, where there was no full script. Generally, what they would do, Larry David and his writers, or Jeff Schaffer on The League, would write one paragraph, sometimes less, maybe sometimes a sentence or 2, describing what happens in a scene. They're just describing a setup. It's a situation, a funny situation. Larry wants to get some ice cream, and they have little tasting spoonfuls. How many tastes of ice cream should you be allowed before it's too many? And that's the premise. And then now go, act the scene. Sitcoms mean situation comedy, right? You think of a funny situation, and then the dialogue will flow from that. So the script for Curb Your Enthusiasm or The League are just a collection of situations that are funny. And then they cast funny people to act out those situations, and you get funny dialogue that then I get to cut together into a scene. And sometimes we have to improve the setups later in ADR because they hadn't fully gotten there in their improv or found the most concise way. But the magic of the improv is worth not having figured it all out in advance.
So, and this I want to bring us into your Grey's Anatomy work. So, working on, and all the way back to The Mind of the Married Man, for example, which I watched. I'm very familiar with that series. We've talked about it before. But that and Curb and Veep and The League, certain there's a certain tone, there's a certain speed. Everything is fairly rapid fire. But you're working now on, or you've been working on Grey's Anatomy, as you mentioned. I mean, it's a drama. It has light moments, but generally it's a drama. It's an hour long versus a half an hour or 35 minutes, which I know some of the cable shows are stretched here and there, so the pay shows. But I understand if I'm hiring an editor, I certainly understand why a comedy, a handheld comedy, a 2 or 3 camera comedy wants a Roger Nygard in there. You have the experience getting this together. I'm thinking and I'm not trying to talk anyone out of hiring you, but I'm thinking in terms of a drama, a Grey's Anatomy, is the appeal of hiring you that you have learned to work fast, capture the notes or the beats and move on? And is that why that would work as well to have you on a drama as it would one of these very special kind of comedies?
Speed is one consideration, and I have been asked that in meetings before being hired is, can you work quickly? But it's not the primary thing. The primary thing is knowing how to handle comedy in an editing room, how to present it, how to cut comedy. It's probably the most difficult thing, in my opinion. It's similar to cutting action, which is also difficult because timing is crucial. And particularly with comedy versus drama, anyone can look at a comedic scene and tell if it's not funny. But it's harder to look at a dramatic scene and say, well, that's not dramatic. It's still going to be kind of dramatic, even if it's badly edited or not as incisively, or if the timing is a little bit off. With comedy, if the timing is a little bit off, it's clearly apparent. So it's a particular skill to be able to to find the funniest version of the footage. And for whatever reason, that's something I do or I've always loved doing and have pursued. And Veep, for example, probably has more words per minute than any show on television. And within those words, they try to fit in as many funny moments as possible. So joke per minute is very high. The ratio is very high. So they need someone who cuts fast and with clarity and picks the right takes. And that's the third part of it is your sensibility such that your sense of humor, is it warped or twisted or in sync enough with the showrunner? For whatever reason, what I think is funny is close enough in line to what Larry David thinks is funny and what Dave Mandel thinks is funny and what Jeff Schaffer thinks is funny. We're all kind of warped in the same way enough that I'm picking enough takes to keep them happy. They don't have to rethink my work to a great extent, and we get the work done in time. That's part of getting work done quickly, is you're picking enough of the right takes.
Is Veep, in terms of the volume of dialogue, the number of words spoken, is it in line with like a Sorkin Sports Night or the West Wing? Is it that kind of thing? Because we know those shows are blah 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 blah. You know, it's just spewing constant dialogue.
Someone should do the metrics and add it up and see who has more words per minute, because that would, I don't know who would win, but I'm sure Veep would be very close if it isn't the winner.
Well, and the League, and I'm sorry that one of the actors from the League was in Sports Night, as I recall, right? Not Peter. Oh,
Uh,
I wasn't one of the leads in the League previously on Sports Night.
I'm not sure because I never watched. I haven't seen Sports Night.
All right. Well, see, that's where we're having a problem. I didn't watch a lot of the League, and you didn't watch Sports Night, so I'm going to trust someone will double check me on IMDb, and if I'm wrong, I know they'll tell me. So let's okay. So, but sticking with Grey's Anatomy for a minute, was that an adjustment for you? Because that. I mean, I'm thinking that's still very different work than certainly even from the documentary work that you do, which is not boom 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 boom. You know, a laugh every minute. What adjustments did you have to make to be effective on Grey's Anatomy?
I did have to slow it down a little bit. My own instincts for cutting things rapidly, particularly in some dramatic scenes, and just let moments hang there so you can kind of savor the emotion. That's the biggest adjustment I made. But Grey's Anatomy is almost like an action show too, because they have these really fast-moving, bloody medical scenes, which are fun to cut. And they also have really funny scenes, funny moments. And the season I worked on, season 14, they were particularly going back a little bit to their comedic roots and trying to have more of those moments. They would call it, I think it was called the comedy couple. They've got the main couple whose relationship you're following, and there's a secondary couple whose relationship you're following. Usually they're younger, they're the interns. It's more comedic. The things that are happening in their relationship are more, they're in awkward situations that are funny. Whereas the main couple, it's a little more dramatic and serious, and people are dying and dealing with death and grief and things that aren't as funny. So then they've got the comedy couple to offset that. And I was partly one of the reasons they hired me was because they wanted to pursue those comedy aspects a little more in the season 14 and onward.
It's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking back. My wife and I watched the show, I guess the first 5 or 6 seasons that it was on, and I was trying to think, well, why did we stop watching? And I think it was real life soap operas kind of overtook, and I felt like the show was becoming very rote and very soap opera-y, and I wasn't interested in that. But the early seasons, there was a lot of humor. Sandra Oh, who's gone on to a lot since then, but was very funny. A lot of the supporting cast was very funny. The character, I think it's Meredith Grey. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, she's the main character.
Main character, main actress. It tended to be a little stiffer, not as funny. But people around her, there's always funny stuff going on. And I think, I was just thinking, I think it was the outside soap opera that just kind of wore me out on it. And yet my son watches it and has gone back, and they're in their 15th season now. And I think he just turned 22, so he had to go back and watch all that stuff, and just was really drawn in by it. So it's interesting. Okay, so I got to talk to you about Who Is America. We're gonna talk about the new film shortly, but I got to talk to you about Who Is America. I did not know, as we were watching I think 6 episodes. Was it 6?
7.
7. As we were watching, I didn't realize that you were involved. And then on the last episode, we just I focused on the credits at the end because I was curious. Well, who's involved in this? And I saw your name go by. I said, "Wait, back it up, back it up." So this is a pretty unique piece of work. Sacha Baron Cohen, of course, had done Dolly G before, and he's done his movies. But this was unique. No one seemed to know that this was being done when it was being recorded. After it was done, we started hearing these little bits from politicians who were denying that they had done things, or they were admitting they had done things and we didn't know what they were talking about. The show was not promoted week to week in terms of, oh, this week you're going to see Bernie Sanders, or this week you're going to see this gun nut, or this, whatever. So it's kind of a guerrilla show. When did you get involved, and when did you realize how different this was from pretty much anything else on TV?
Well, when they handed me an NDA to sign at the first meeting, that was a pretty clear indication. They were very secretive about it. Even the people they met with, they had signed NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And so even if you didn't work on the show, just meeting with them, because you're going to figure out kind of what's going on just in the meeting. The whole process was secretive for obvious reasons. And so I didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it until it aired. And they would keep reminding you, the only way this is going to work is if we keep this secret until the air date. When I signed on to work, I didn't know who they were going to interview or really what they were going to shoot. I just knew that, he did Ali G and other things, obviously Borat and
right.
what have you. Well, very familiar, obviously, with his work. And so when the footage started coming, it was always kind of a surprise. Once I saw what the footage was, then I shaped it into the funniest version of that footage. That's what I do. I take footage and I make the funniest version and present it, in that case, to Sasha and the other producers. Usually the first cuts were 15 minutes or so, and ultimately were cut down to between 2 and 6, 7 minutes, maybe, at the most. Sometimes they were split into pieces and aired in different pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Until the show finally aired, I didn't know which of my segments were going to be on which episode, because they were constantly moved around. They were kind of modular as Sasha was playing with what should go where. So I was I didn't know what was going to air when either until it finally aired. And then the segments I worked on were sprinkled throughout the season of 7 episodes.
I have to ask, what segments can you talk about the segments that you actually worked on?
The Quinceanera segment, some of the green screen when they have the celebrities who come in and meet with the Italian jet setter who would get them to do testimonials. I worked on a couple of those. Every one of the characters, I worked on a couple of segments. The British ex-con, who I think was Second Chance, who gets a second chance. He would try a different job every segment. Once I worked on a segment where he was worked with a real estate agent, and then one where he was an EDM DJ.
Oh God, that was something. Yes. Oh my God. People start realizing what they're hearing.
And that was a real club that they took over for the night, and they hadn't planned to go to a club when they first started this. They just met with some DJs in Miami to say, hey, this guy wants to be a DJ. He's an ex-con, just to see how those interviews would go. And one of the guys they met with said, hey, I love your work. After he played the song for him, let me get you on stage. And so then I got a call saying, is this footage funny? Should we go forward? Should we do the stage thing? Or are we wasting time, or is it good? I said, yeah, absolutely. Do the stage thing. That sounds great. And we need a button, a resolution for it anyway. And so that one, no one was really sure what they had, for example, with any segment, particularly with that one, until it was finished and then screened for an audience and to see if how they reacted to it. They did several test screenings of these episodes before finishing, and all of those people in the test screenings had to be sworn to secrecy. So I think they were a little surprised that this show got finished without word really getting out, but it didn't. And so it was, as you see, it was a surprise debut.
Obviously you knew he was fine, but watching the episode where Sasha gets up on stage and is the DJ, and things are starting to happen, some of the things that coming out of his mouth that he was playing, I seem to recall. Now, I didn't know which segment you worked on, so I didn't just watch it yesterday. It's been a few weeks, obviously. But I'm thinking, I feel like I remember watching that thinking, how is it he's going to walk away from this without getting beaten to crap? I mean, it's just there were several times during the series where you think, oh, someone's going to beat the crap out. Even as big as he is, You just feel like someone's just going to be mad and they're going to haul off and hit Sasha. Didn't happen. I just was, you know.
No, it's bizarre how he can get people to do what they do. But if you put somebody who presents an authoritative figure in the room and fully commits to it, people generally fall in line. And they did in every scenario. I mean, he's always got a car ready to take him away from the set, just in case that happens. Okay. But human nature is such that people will. I mean, there have been movies and studies about this, how people will fall in line when an authority figure tells them to behave or to do a certain thing, or or is behaving like an authority figure. They're deferential to that person.
Is that why? I don't want to go over the line here, but is that why so many of his subjects in Who is America are Republican?
Well, that's a good question for a psychological study.
Yeah.
Who is more easily conned is really who Sasha looks for. People who I mean, he interviewed a lot of people of all different political beliefs, and it's just which segments were the funniest. That's what made the air. That's all. That's the only metric, is which one's funniest.
Did you ever feel that any of it was over the line? Anything that you worked on was over the line, or was mean-spirited, or was it just...
Well, who's drawing the line? Which line? We edit the show for funny. What's the funniest? And it wasn't my job as the editor to make a value judgment or morality judgment on people's beliefs. It was just to find the funniest version of this footage. You get to judge once you see. You can make any judgment you want, but he never forced anybody to do anything. You remember those experiments in San Francisco, and there was a movie about it where they would bring in students and tell them they're electrocuting someone in the other room and tell them to turn up the dial. Oh. And these are very famous from the 60s, just to see, like, they're testing to see why did people do what the Nazis told them to do, what their superiors, people always say, well, I was just following orders. Why do people follow orders that are so clearly against what you would think, oh, I would never do that. But the thing is, you would probably. People do what they're told when there's an authority figure standing next to you holding a clipboard wearing authority glasses, whatever. And so they did this study. And I remember there's a movie on Netflix now. I forget the name of it. I think it's called The Tester, or I have to look it up, about these tests. And they would have a man with a clipboard in a white lab coat stand there and tell the student, okay, turn the dial up another notch. And they would hear over a speaker the person in the other room. They'd see them get hooked up to wires, and then they'd go in the other room, and they wouldn't be able to see them. They'd only hear, and it's an actor pretending to be shocked in the other room. They're not really being shocked. That dial is not really connected to anything. So they turn it up a notch, and the person would go, oh, that hurts. Oh, that hurts even more. And then the screams, and the tester would keep telling them, okay, turn it up another notch, and they would see how far they would go. And most people went all the way to the final notch, where they're clearly electrocuting someone because they were told to. And then afterwards they're asked, why did you do that? Well, because I was told to by an authority figure. And I think Sacha Baron Cohen he understands human nature and is showing us another version of this experiment that people will do as they're told. And it's something we have to be careful of. We have to be aware of, so that we don't fall into that trap. In the military, there's a rule that you're supposed to follow all orders given to you by your commanding officer, unless, in your judgment, that order is in clear violation of the law or a regulation of some kind. And so that exclusion is there for a reason, right? And so Sasha is giving us a comedy version, a comedy demonstration of that principle, of the same principle that the Nazis used to get people to do things. And it's a teaching moment, really. It's a learning moment for all of us to be aware that we should question what we're told, don't believe everything you're told. Find corroborating evidence before you believe something. Ask for evidence. And Sasha has found a funny way to teach that lesson.
Is the org chart working on Sasha's show different than Curb or Veep or League or any of these others in terms of, again, you on Curb you work very closely with Larry. On the League, it sounds like you work closely with those guys. On Veep, probably with David. Did you work directly with Sasha, or is he more isolated? Is he more involved? I mean,
no, he gets very involved. Yeah, he comes in and it's all him toward the end, and the results of test screenings and discussions with the directors and the producers. Everybody gets involved and just trying to find the funniest version of something. They shot a lot of segments that didn't make the show because they just weren't judged funny enough or as funny as the other options.
Sarah Palin,
for example, didn't make the final cut and just wasn't as funny, I think, maybe, as some of the other choices.
Of course, she contributed all the PR, so you almost got all the value out of her before the show even aired. Interesting.
Yeah, she panicked. She hit the panic button a little too soon.
Gee, imagine that. Is there any likelihood that this show will be back, or was this a one-time?
You might have to wait. I don't know. I mean, how many years until people's guard go down again?
Yeah.
He couldn't really do a lot of his Dolly G show again because after he was able to do movies though.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if you see movies come out of some of these characters.
I wondered if because a year, I think you had mentioned that you were done with this like a year ago, right?
The filming finished in February, I think, of this year.
Oh, okay.
But the filming started about 16, 17 months ago.
Oh. So what I wondered is if after the filming was done for this first round, but before it aired, if they might have continued filming to get a second season out. But I guess that's not what happened.
No, and plus a lot of these things would be dated anyway. You couldn't really sit on to these things for too long. Some of them anyway.
The episodes would be kind of like, although some of them are going to be comedy gold forever. But some of the episodes would also be like an episode of The Circus or John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, where if you watch them in 6 months, it's going to be like, yeah, it was really funny at the time. It was really explosive in that moment. And how would you? Last question about that, and then we're absolutely going to talk about The Truth About Marriage. How would you compare working with Sasha to working with Larry, let's say?
Well, they're both hysterically funny and at the best at what they do. It's amazing to work with comedic talent like that. They're unparalleled. Who comes close to what either of them do? Nobody in their respective categories. But they're also incredibly different in how they approach what they do and what they deliver. So they're the same in that they're unparalleled, but they're completely different in their approach and the type of comedy they deliver.
Actually, I lied. One more question about Who Is America. How many cameras would they take on a shoot? It seemed to be a fairly intimate setting, but
usually 2 or 3.
Okay.
Generally 2 for sure. Sometimes the director himself would hold a third camera, and we'd use that footage also. It was a very small crew, and because they didn't want to be obtrusive. They tell people we're making a reality show, and so there's some cameras here, and everyone was aware of it. No one was surprised by that, except for maybe the hidden camera segments that they did.
I'm sorry, I flashed back. There were two episodes that I still can't forget. And I don't know if you worked on it. Maybe you didn't work on either of these particular segments, but the art dealer in one of the early shows, and as he just kept introducing more and more insane elements to what was in the art was just nuts. And then of course the anti-terrorist training. I think it was there were a couple that were similar, but I think like there was an anti-terrorist training where the guy who was training like he was wearing I think a dildo or something, and the guy
Yeah,
actually
I cut
got.
that one. Yeah, I worked on that one.
Oh my God! Can you tell me anything about that? That was nuts. That was absolutely insane. You kept thinking, at one point when the guy got on his knees in front of Allie with the dildo, and I swear I saw Allie Sasha's eyes like, is this really happening? Are the cameras rolling? Are you getting this? It's just
Well,
nuts.
he would keep pushing things further and further just to see how far someone would go. Eventually, he'd reach a point where he would get a sense that they're not going to go any further, and then he would back off.
Mm.
But to get to that point, he would spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours with that person, or several people. Like in the Quinceanera episode, they had 3 people where he would teach them self-defense. He spent a full hour on actual self-defense techniques and get them into the framework and the mindset of this is real, and it's a real class. And it wasn't until as time went on that he would start introducing slightly more absurd aspects, and then keep raising it until it got so absurd. But it's like these experiments from the 60s that show people will do as they're told. Mm. If you put put them in a room with an authority figure who orders them to do something, it's human nature. Generally, people will do this until they reach a limit or a level where they go, wait a minute. And that's the lesson we should take from this show. Even though it's a funny show, there is a moral to the story, which is if someone orders you or tells you something, question it, think about it, reflect on it. Don't blindly follow. And I think it's an important lesson.
I think what you just said was important about that he would spend an hour or two teaching them actual techniques. It seems like to get the people who appeared on the show to do the things that they did, which came from them, there was no script, you have to build rapport, you have to build confidence. You have to look them in the eye and be convincing, and make them comfortable. And then, oh my God, the things that happened. Okay, so let's talk about the new film. I have seen the 2 Trekkies. I have seen The Nature of Existence, the extended Nature of Existence. I have the entire set of every topic. So I'm very familiar with your documentary work. What drew you to marriage, and particularly the truth about marriage, which personally, as a guy who's been married 30 years, I don't know that I care to know the truth about marriage, Roger.
How could you be married for 30 years and not already know the truth about marriage?
Well, the one truth I know, I said this to my wife literally just this weekend, the one truth I know is if I knew this one thing in the first couple of years, we would have been a lot happier, and that is I don't have to respond to everything she says.
And you shouldn't.
No, exactly.
Just empathize. Just say, that's terrible, honey. I'm so sorry that happened. The end. And then shut up and listen.
Best lesson I ever got. I wish someone had given me a manual with that at the beginning, because, man, I could have saved a lot of fighting and arguing. But why marriage? Why this topic?
One goal is to provide those couple of those suggestions that can make everybody's lives less miserable, nicer, happier. There are some very simple things you can do that no one tells you. No one teaches you these things. Your society encourages us to get together, to marry, to couple up, but doesn't give us the tools for how to do it in the best, most satisfying way. There's no class. You're not given a class on how to be married. So I set out to kind of find out what those secret techniques are, the answers to why is it so hard for people to be married? Does it have to be difficult? Why does it have to be so difficult? How can we make it better? Mm-hmm. That was my core question that I was kind of perplexed by. I'm single. I've never been married. I've gotten close a few times and it didn't work out. And people always look at you funny. What do you mean you're not married? You're single. What's wrong with you? Is it wrong to be single? And it's really about how can we be happiest in our lives, married, single, in a relationship, whatever. What are the relationship hacks that we're all looking for? I did a lot of reading, read a lot of books, and then tracked down a lot of experts, and then asked them the questions and collected all of their solutions, suggestions, ideas into this movie. I also started bringing my camera when I got invited to weddings and would film the wedding and interview the couple. And then I just kind of sat on the footage for a few years and then checked back with these people 3 years, 5 years, 7 years later to see what happened after the honeymoon period was over. And in each case, it was always completely a surprise. Like I never expected that it would turn out the way things turn out, but that's life is. You know, the old joke, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Right.
Nothing's going to go the way you're planning it. It's going to go some way surprising. And the best way to navigate it is to have some tools. And so my film has all the tools I collected are in the film.
And who do you see as the likely audience?
Anyone interested in a relationship, which is about almost 100% of humanity.
And
right, we're all interested in that. We all want a better one.
Right.
We want less misery in our life. We want more happiness.
Are you more likely or less likely now to pursue a lifetime relationship, to be married after doing the film?
I don't know if I'm more or less likely, but I'm more open to the idea and even more in favor of the idea of being with somebody, because that's what we're designed to do. We're social creatures. We're designed to be with someone. The question is, how can we do it given our current culture's expectations in a way that's more satisfying? And that's what I found out. That's what I set out to find, and I did find.
This is the truth about marriage is similar to the nature of existence and not that it starts with the and the third word is of, but is it the same type of thing where you're kind of mixing? There's advice, there's insight, and there's also great moments of humor. Is it the same type of setup delivery?
Yes, it is. It's all those things. It's in terms of format, it's very similar. One big difference is that at the end of the nature of existence, I didn't get on a pedestal and tell you which God to believe in or not believe in. I left it to you. I presented, here's the panoply of all what everyone believes in the world. That went around and asked everyone to tell me what they believed, and you decide. But at the end of the truth about marriage, I had some very specific things that I learned, and then I summarized it at the end. In fact, when I hit the answer, I stopped everything and go, wait, hey, I hope you're paying attention. That was the answer. We just found it. We're at the end of our journey now because this is the answer. It's like I have this moment where it's all to stop everything. Here's the answer. So I did find an answer, the big answer to relationship problems and what are we supposed to do and why is it going so wrong? And that's one big difference this time around is I take a position.
Is this the type of film, and I know it's very early, as you mentioned at the top, you're literally just weeks out of finishing editing and you're getting ready to hit the festival circuit and look for distribution. Is it the type of film that like a next generation of people getting ready to be married or considering getting married, that maybe their churches or their synagogues or their mosques, the mosque might recommend, you should watch this. You're getting ready to be married. You should watch this. You might learn something. This might help prepare you for a life together. Is it that type of film?
Absolutely. You can see, if you want to taste, you can see the trailer I just put up. It's at the truthaboutmarriage.com. I screened the film when I was working on it for my nephew. He's a millennial, or what's a 20, young 20-something-year-old. I don't know what they're called nowadays. But after watching it, it changed his interaction with women dramatically because he was making all these mistakes, which no one teaches you. And suddenly, just like this lesson you had wished you had learned at the beginning of your 30-year marriage, right? Which is number one, women like to be listened to. You need to listen to them. Which is about recognizing them. They want to be recognized. Any human being does, men too. But particularly for men dealing with women, ask her how she feels and then shut up. Don't offer solutions. Just empathize. Just say, "Oh, I'm sorry that happened. Oh, that's great that happened." Whatever, and be agreeably empathetic. Mm-hmm. If you do just that, just shut up and listen, you're going to do much better. That's one of the big lessons for men that I discovered and presented in the movie, and which my nephew is now using to great advantage. And for women, the counterpoint is, and I heard this from Dr. Pat Allen, who's a relationship teacher and author, women never ask a man how he feels unless he's puking or bleeding. Only ask him what he thinks. And if you want things to go smoothly and you want to have a better relationship, that's like little relationship hacks. Things are going to go better if you do that. Men don't like to discuss feelings because they're not as designed for it as women. Their brains are physiologically different. If you ask a man how he's feeling, it's mothering, and he starts to feel smothered. A penny for your thoughts. The worst thing you could ever ask a man. But if men and women can do, like, for example, these two things, the relationships will go much more smoothly. I've got several other things like that in the film that I discovered, many others that are fascinating. And the source of the problem, why these things happen, and it's hilarious. Human beings are hilarious. So ultimately the film is a comedy because life is just funny.
It seems like everything that you've learned and you've told me about here, the problem with you not being married may just be your hours and your commitment to your work. Is that possible?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, if I was married, I probably would have never been able to make this movie because I'd have to pay for braces in private school and endless soccer practice. Who knows? Emergency room visits to pull out rusty nails, whatever. But people find a way, right? Life usually happens despite your plans, and you have kids unexpectedly. Most of the time it's unexpected. I have one couple in my film talk about how their child happened, and it was a shock to the guy. He finds out on camera that his wife planned it.
Whoa.
He thought it was a mistake. He thought it, was unplanned. Who knew? I didn't, but surprise, life happens.
Wow. When
you're making other plans and you adjust. And the best way you can deal with these, like the curveballs, are to have some tools. A handful of, you don't need much, but a couple of slight changes will change the direction of your life a little bit more towards happiness and less misery in your interactions with people. That's what I found.
Wow. All right. Well, so obviously the year ahead for you is going to be a lot of film festivals, showing the film around. Do you have something next lined up that you're going to work on, or is it too soon to be asking you that, having just finished this film?
I'll be finishing Veep Season 7, the final season of Veep, for the next several months. That's going to be taking me into next year. And then a lot of film festival screenings with this documentary about marriage. And then if I were to start guessing what my future held, God would start laughing. Who knows?
Okay. So it's not lined up quite yet, but you're pretty busy for the next period of time.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. My to-do list only gets longer. It never seems to get shorter. My idea list gets longer. I've so many ideas and scripts I'm writing and ideas and manuscripts and concepts. And eventually one kind of bubbles to the top, and that's the one I charge forward with until I get it there. I mean, this marriage documentary has taken me 8 years since shooting my first interview. But I finally, got it over the finish line. And once I got it over the finish line, I stood up and looked around and realized that finish line was actually the starting line of the next battle, for distribution and
Right.
film festival distribution and getting the film seen. So it never quite ends. And while I'm doing that, I'm percolating dozens of hundreds, who knows, multiple ideas, and working on TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
I never, I guess you could say I'm a workaholic, but it's not, I think work is the wrong word. I'm a funaholic because it's fun. What I do, I think, is fun. And so it's easy to do it. It's easy to work hard. I love it. I love what I do. I mean, I guess I'm very blessed to be able to say that about my career and my daily choice of activities.
That's great. I know that's the way I feel about what I do. If you're not going to enjoy it, why do it? I love what I do, and I've always sensed that from you. It doesn't surprise me to hear you say that at all. Even the hours are long, the work is hard, but you clearly enjoy it because you keep coming back to it. Well, folks, listen, you can see my guest Roger Nygard's work on some of TV's most outrageous comedies, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Veep, The League. We didn't even talk about Crashing, which I know he worked on with Pete Holmes, and Who is America. He's also worked on season 14 of Grey's Anatomy. He's got the final season of Veep coming up, he just mentioned. Or you can watch his documentaries, Trekkies, Trekkies 2, The Nature of Existence, and the latest, which I'm guessing we will hopefully see sometime in 2019, The Truth About Marriage. And you can order DVDs or download much of his catalogs at a great price at MrMedia.com. That's MRmedia.com. If you're watching the video on MrMedia.com, below the image of the video, you'll see the covers of some of his work. You can click on that and order it, download it from Amazon. Roger, what website would you like people to check out, or websites in your case? I know you have your own for your work, RogerNygard.com, right? And
you can start there, and that has links to everything. But yeah, RogerNygard.com or TheTruthAboutMarriage.com are good places to start.
Very good. And are you a Twitter, Facebook guy? Can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter as Roger Nygard, and Facebook as well. And The Truth About Marriage has a Facebook page. It's all there.
Excellent. Roger, always a pleasure to talk to you. I always feel very energized after talking to you. I want to go out and start a million projects. And so, as always, thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
You're welcome. Anytime. I'll see you again, I hope.
Turn your back on the deceiver. It's a bad idea to believe her. A bad idea to believe her. Turn up the stereo receiver. Turn up the stereo receiver.